Hi there. This video we're going to have a look at some of the most interesting ways we've come up with to kill each other. Poisons. Quick disclaimer for legal reasons, this is not life advice, this is science. Murder is still a crime, so don't try using these chemicals at home. Oh, and if you don't believe what I'm saying, or are looking to find out more, check out the references in the corner. The numbers link to the source document in the description, telling you exactly where I got this information from. First off, we have cyanide. In this form, it's a complex ion made of a carbon atom triple bonded to a nitrogen atom. If you really irritated someone, you might see it as a hydrogen cyanide or potassium cyanide. Rasputin, the famous Russian monk and inspiration behind the brilliant Boney M song, was fed potassium cyanide in an attempt to poison him. On the other hand, assuming you don't have Russian nobles out to kill you, you might have just eaten a dodgy plant. Apple seeds, for example, contain a compound called amygdalin, which is converted to hydrogen cyanide in the body. The same compound is found in apricot seeds, peach and cherry stones. These plants contain an enzyme which turns amygdalin into hydrogen cyanide when they're under attack. Cyanide works by stopping aerobic respiration. That means that no matter how much oxygen you get in your body, you're unable to use it to respire. Aerobic respiration is a notoriously complicated process, so I'll do my best to give it a quick summary here. The overall equation is taking glucose, sugar, and combining it with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of ATP. To do this, your body takes it through a set of enzyme-controlled reactions, which are split into three processes: glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain. The whole process uses almost 30 different enzymes. Cyanide stops just one of these from working, which is enough to kill you. This enzyme is known as cytochrome C oxidase, and it's the last enzyme in the electron transport chain. At the beginning of the electron transport chain, the energy from glucose is now stored in a storage molecule called NADH. This is a reduced form of the molecule, so it has more electrons than it would like. It gives them up to the first protein in the electron transport chain, and the chain moves the electrons down progressively lower energy levels. Each time they do this, it releases energy. This energy is used to move hydrogen ions across the membrane. Eventually, the electrons are handed off to oxygen to form water. The hydrogen ions which have been moved are then used by ATP synthase to produce ATP. That's a lot of words. All you need to know is that this process is really important to you. Without aerobic respiration, you stop being able to use most of your energy, which is very bad. Cytochrome C oxidase is that final enzyme in the chain, responsible for handing the electrons over to oxygen. Cyanide binds to the enzyme at an allosteric site, so somewhere away from its active site. That stops it from working and effectively stops aerobic respiration. Eventually, that'll kill you. That also makes cyanide a non-competitive, reversible inhibitor. Whilst it sounds bad, there are actually plenty of treatments available for cyanide poisoning. An important one is the use of sodium nitrite. This converts the iron in your hemoglobin from iron 2+ to iron 3+. This new protein is known as methemoglobin, and it'll happily take the cyanide ions, freeing up the cytochrome C oxidase. An important consideration, however, is that whilst hemoglobin transports oxygen throughout your body, methemoglobin can't. So it's important to make sure the body is still able to transport enough oxygen at the same time. Up next on our list of things you should not have injected into you is Botox. No, really, Botox is the brand name of one type of botulinum toxin, which is a neurotoxin produced by the bacterium Clostridium botulinum. It is often cited as the single most acutely lethal toxin known to mankind. How do we know, you say? It's time for a lesson in some particularly grotesque maths. A common way of measuring the lethality of a particular substance is by a measure known as the median lethal dose, or LD50. This measure tells you how much of a substance will kill half the animals in a population, that is, the median mass of a lethal dose. So, if you know the LD50 of a substance, you can calculate how much of it you'd need to eat for it to probably kill you. Whilst these numbers serve as a pretty good guide, most of them are measured in lab animals, so they are different in humans. The ethics of this are incredibly contentious, as such studies normally involve killing all the animals in a test group. The numbers also vary massively depending on the way they're given the poison. A lower LD50 means that the substance is more toxic. So, for example, the median lethal dose of water is 90,000 milligrams per kilogram. That means for an average person, they'd have to drink 62 kilograms times 90,000, which comes to about 5.5 litres of water. For hydrogen cyanide, that's 1.52 milligrams per kilogram, or 0.0942 grams to kill an average human. That's a heck of a lot lower, which means cyanide is far more lethal than water, surprise surprise. For sarin gas, the infamous nerve agent, the LD50 is even lower at 0.172 milligrams per kilogram. For ricin, an even more deadly poison, it's 0.022 milligrams per kilogram. Botulinum toxin's median lethal dose is estimated to be about 1 nanogram per kilogram in humans. That's 0.0000001 milligram per kilogram, or just 0.0000062 grams to kill an average human, and even less if you're particularly small. That makes it about 1,000,000 times more poisonous than cyanide. So yes, this stuff is particularly nasty. You can actually be poisoned naturally as a type of food poisoning known as botulism, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to prepare food safely. But let's say you've eaten some improperly pickled fish. What's it going to do to you? Botulinum toxin is a neurotoxin, so it acts on your nerves. Generally speaking, the weak spot of any nerve is at the synapse. That's a gap between two nerves or between a nerve and a muscle. Normally, the nerve receives an electric signal from the brain or somewhere else in the body. To get the message to the muscle, it releases a chemical known as acetylcholine, which binds to receptors on the other side and triggers a muscle contraction. The acetylcholine starts off in vesicles, which are moved to the end of the nerve where they fuse with the membrane and are released. To do this, they use proteins known as snare proteins. The way they work is complex and not yet fully understood. For now, it's easy to think of them as the key the acetylcholine needs to get out of the cell. Botox breaks this key in half. So now, the vesicle is unable to get out of the cell and release its acetylcholine. There's now no way for the nerve to signal the muscle. This leads to a type of paralysis known as flaccid paralysis, where muscles are unable to contract at all. Obviously, this is less than ideal, but it becomes a real problem when it affects your respiratory muscles. The eventual cause of death is probably going to be from the inability to breathe. This is also the reason for the lack of movement in many celebrity foreheads. Botox actually has many medical uses as well, but only when using tiny quantities. In terms of treatment, botulinum toxin is different to cyanide because it's actually a protein. It's about 150,000 daltons in size, so it's a lot bigger. That's the equivalent weight of 150,000 hydrogen atoms, or roughly 5,000 times heavier than a cyanide ion. The antitoxin used to treat it is made up of antibodies. These bind to the toxin while it's still in the blood, which stops it from getting into your nerve cells in the first place. What the antitoxin can't do is remove the toxin that's already in there. Being treated for botulism can often involve being placed on a ventilator for weeks or months while your body slowly regenerates the affected nerves. However, with quick antitoxin treatment and intensive respiratory care, 90 to 95% of people make a good recovery from foodborne botulism. You may not be so lucky at higher doses. And finally, we've got good old-fashioned arsenic. Now, arsenic in its pure form is an element on the periodic table, just underneath phosphorus. Technically speaking, arsenic has the highest median lethal dose of all the poisons we've talked about today, at over 15 milligrams per kilogram required to kill the rats tested on. That makes it the least toxic of the poisons we've talked about today, but arsenic kills far more people than the other two combined. The reason behind this lies in the difference between two types of poisoning, acute and chronic. So far, we've only talked about acute poisoning, where you take the substance in one go and get symptoms of poisoning straight away. Chronic poisoning is where you take in low levels of a substance regularly and the poisoning effects build up over time. This is the most common type of poisoning with arsenic. We'll go into what that means for the world in a sec, but first let's take a look as to why arsenic is bad for you. Arsenic inhibits 200 different enzymes, is a class 1 carcinogen, which means it can definitely cause cancer. It damages the immune system and damages the peripheral nervous system. It affects almost every part of the body and gets in the way of plenty of critical reactions. Notice where arsenic is on the periodic table. Unsurprisingly, it can bond in very similar ways to phosphorus. In your body, this means a cell uses an arsenate group instead of a phosphate group, for example in the production of ATP. But whilst arsenic might look similar to phosphorus, it certainly doesn't work the same, resulting in many crucial reactions just not taking place. As you may have guessed, that's bad. Arsenic also has an affinity for thiols. These are sulfur-containing compounds, of which a common one is the amino acid cysteine. Cysteine often sits in the active sites of enzymes, where it plays a crucial role in many reactions. When arsenic is present, it binds itself to cysteine, which pulls the protein out of alignment. The shape and alignment of proteins is crucial to their function, so if arsenic changes their shape, they're useless. If you take in enough arsenic, all of these effects together will kill you. The vast majority of arsenic-related deaths are due to chronic poisoning from a lifetime of drinking toxic groundwater. Globally, 100 million people are at risk of cancer and other negative health effects thanks to dangerous levels of arsenic. In Bangladesh, for example, 39 million people are drinking arsenic-contaminated water every day. In the areas affected, 20% of deaths are due to arsenic poisoning, 1 in 5. In Bangladesh alone, that puts an arsenic death count at 43,000 people every year. It's not just Bangladesh either. Richer countries like the USA have a problem with it too, with dangerously high levels of arsenic being measured in wells across 25 different states. There are some very clever solutions and the problem is improving, thankfully, but it's certainly not over yet. Anyway, that's been Poisons. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.